Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's WEConnect International webinar. My name is Maggie Berry, and I'm the Executive Director for WEConnect International here in Europe. And I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar, What Does the Brexit Scenario Mean for UK Business? Our presenter today is Valeria Nicoli-Carr. She works for MD Group, one of our certified women's business enterprises, and she's responsible for the leadership of their patient retention division called Patient Primary. Prior to working in the pharmaceutical industry, Valeria developed a background, completing a law degree with a focus on European and international legislation. In today's session, Valeria is going to be sharing more detail about the history of the UK's relationship with Europe, as well as discussing where we are now with Brexit and its potential impact on different industries. And I will just say that we had planned this webinar at the beginning of the year, and we'd expected Brexit to have happened by now. But even so, we thought it would be a really useful topic to cover today. So to keep background noise to minimum, everybody's on mute apart from Valeria, and so please do use the chat functionality to ask any questions that you might have, and there'll be time for discussions and questions at the end. Valeria's going to talk for about 45 minutes or so, and the session is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back to it again. So Valeria, thank you so much for presenting for us today. It's over to you, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Maggie, and thank you for participating to this webinar today. So yes, as Maggie said, we have planned this webinar, I think it was in October last year, and at that point we had a certain date about Brexit. It was the 29th of March, and my original title was What Happened After the 29th of March. So as we progressed during the year, I've realized that Brexit was not going to happen, and therefore we had to change slightly the webinar for today. So my main goal today is to give an overview about Brexit, starting from an historical overview, and then give an overview about where we are right now, what are the future options for the UK, and obviously for the UK businesses, as well as for British and European people. Just to mention very briefly about my legal background, I have developed a thesis that was about 5 years ago on the position of the UK in the European Union. So I'm particularly interested in this matter. I have spent a long time researching the different position of the UK in the European Union, and how the relationship with the European Union has always been a bit difficult since the very beginning. So I mean, I would like to have more certain answer, and to be able to advise every business in the UK about the future collaboration with the European Union. Unfortunately, I have to be very honest with you, nobody knows about it. So I will take this opportunity today to give a very good overview about what happened since the UK joined in the 70s, and how the relationship has been always a bit difficult since the very beginning, and then give an overview about what is happening in the recent day, as we are in a very crucial phase for the Brexit negotiation, but also for the UK government, as we are about to have a new Prime Minister very soon. Okay, so this is myself. As Maggie has introduced me, I work for MD Group, and I'm now responsible for the complete setup of Patient Primary, and we provide patient retention services to the patients. So my webinar today has got a little bit of an influence of the pharmaceutical industry, because it's the industry where I work, and I'm more up to date with Brexit and the regulatory point of view for the pharmaceutical industry. But I've tried to broaden up a bit the experience and the knowledge with also all the other industry, and the future relationship between Europe and Brexit. Okay, so I think we all agree that although the Article 15 has now been triggered, there is a lot of uncertainty around Brexit, about our future, about what is going to happen for the investment in this country, but also what kind of relationship the UK business is going to have with Europe. So in this webinar, we're just going to talk about Brexit, where are we now, the difficult relationship since the beginning, and the potential impact on Brexit on different industries. Okay, so starting from a bit of an history overview about the relationship between Europe and the UK, we have noticed that when Europe was, I would call it a baby, was just starting to take form after the Second World War, UK was not really involved in the negotiations. So the very first treaty that has been actually put in place in the 1951, which was the treaty establishing the European Coal and Steel Community, was a treaty that was created to make sure that there was interdependence in coal and steel, so there wouldn't be any other country to prevail on other countries. So this was after the Second World War. As you can imagine, Germany was defeated, but also the main reason why the first European treaties were created is to ensure a period of peace and a period of prosperity for Europe. So the very first treaty in 1951 was signed by 6 countries. It was Germany, West Germany at that point, France, Italy, and Belgium, Luxembourg, and Netherlands. So it was the very first treaty that led the start to the European Union. Then we had another treaty in 1957. And that was the treaty for the European Economic Community and the European Atomic Energy Community, the Euratom and the EEC. And again, the same countries took part to the second treaties, and it was the main reason why this treaty were signed is to ensure the stability and the peace in Europe. So at the very beginning, Britain, and that was just in the early 60s, we start to think about, well, actually, it would be good to join this community. It was mainly an industrial community. There wasn't any discussion about having a European body or one parliament. It was just purely to set up an industrial community between these 6 countries. Since the very beginning, the UK application has been rejected by the France president, and in 2 different instances, in 1963 and also in 1967. So President Charles de Gaulle in that instance said that a number of aspects of Britain's economy, such as the working practice to agriculture, had made Britain incompatible with Europe. And this is just to show how the very beginning of this relationship between this very new form alliance of country in Europe and Britain has been not easy. So once de Gaulle, Charles de Gaulle, the French president, had relinquished the French presidency, and that was late in the 60s, the UK made a third and successful application for the membership. At that point, you can imagine we're in the 60s. Nothing has been discussed in terms of monetary or regulation or the parliament, but already late in the 60s. There has been some discussion around the parliamentary freedom and the fact that the legislative power in the UK would be affected by entering into the European communities. However, there's been an internal debate in the UK government and comparing the pros and cons of taking part in the European Union or not taking part in the European Union. The benefits were absolutely more than the negative aspect, and therefore UK joined in the 1973. Moving on. So So just a few years later, there has been a referendum. So we're only in 1972 when the UK joined the European Union. At that point, it wasn't the European Union, but it was by signing the Treaty of Accession, and that was done by the Prime Minister Edward Heath. But only a couple of years later, so in 1975, there has been a first national referendum on whether the UK should remain in the European communities, and this was under the Labour Party. So on the 5th of June 1975, the electorate expressed the interest in staying in the European Union. I've put an image of Margaret Thatcher because at that point she wasn't in power yet, but she was campaigning to stay in the European Union. So there was a lot of the parliamentary forces were in favor of staying in the European Union. What is very interesting about the Labour Party at this point is that in the general election in October 1974, the leader of the Labour Party, Harold Wilson, made a commitment to renegotiate Britain's terms of membership of the European Community, and to hold a referendum on whether to remain in the European Community on the new terms. So I find this is very similar to what happened recently. So, there has been this has been part of the manifesto of the Labour Party in the 70s, and in that instance, the referendum voted to stay in. So there was the turnout was just under 65%, but the outcome was to remain in the European Union. But as you can see, we have just joined the European Union. Only 3 years later, there has been already a referendum about staying or leaving the European Union. So I think it's worth remembering all of that part of history, because I think that the history has been really repeating the course from the 70s until now. So what is interesting to see is that since the very beginning, the United Kingdom has opted out for the newly formed EMS. So it's the European Monetary System, which was the very incipit of the euro. So there was this is when the European Union started to talk about having one currency. It was much later when the euro was introduced, but the United Kingdom had a strong position to stay out of the European monetary system. Later on, this is in the 80s, when Thatcher government was in force, there has been a lot of sort of battles with the European Union, and one of them ended after 4 years of battling, and at the end, Thatcher managed to get the money back on the VAT. So that really is crucial, because it really shows how the position of the UK has been different, but also how the negotiating power, in this case led by Margaret Thatcher, has been extremely important. So the fact that Margaret Thatcher managed to get the money back on the VAT issues obviously had an impact on strengthening the position of the UK, but also in some way damaging the relationship with Europe. So there is a very important speech that Margaret Thatcher addressed in Burj about how the UK would like to oppose to a European superstate exercise a new dominance from Brussels. And I was reading when I was preparing this slide, and it's so actual, because you can see that in the last 30 years, the dominance power in Europe are still the same, and how the UK position hasn't been changed much, but it's so actual, and I would recommend to have a look if you have time. So just going back to the history facts. So what happened in the 1990? The United Kingdom joined the European exchange rate mechanism, and what happened is really quite shocking, because basically the pound was compared to the Deutschmark, and this created quite a big issues for the British economy. So from 1990 to the 1992, UK joined the European exchange rate mechanism, and this is when the first parties that were campaigning a referendum started to become alive. So there was actually 1994. There was the first referendum party that was created, and at the same time, in 1993, the UK Independence Party, the UKIP, was formed as well. So what can we say about all of this history and the relationship from the 70s to the 90s? Is that pro and anti-European views have been really taking the leadership at one point or another in the history. So sometimes there have been some dramatic swings between the two camps, and what can we say is that David Cameron, when he campaigned for his general election, he also proposed to do a referendum in case that his party won the election, and this is what exactly this is what happened on the 23rd of June 2016. So the referendum resulted in 51.9% of people that expressed an interest in leaving the European Union. And this is where we are right now. So we have expressed an interest in leaving the European Union. David Cameron decided that he wasn't the leader in charge of leading the withdrawal agreement. So we are all aware of the latest changes in politics, which Theresa May now still in power, but we are going to have a new minister in I think it will be next week. So the last couple of years have been very not easy for the UK government, but this is where we are right now. So we are in a very important part, because the history could go one way or another. We can accept the withdrawal agreement and move on, or we can actually exit Brexit without a deal. And I think over the summer we will know exactly where we're going. But what's happening right now is that there haven't been new negotiation between the UK and the European Union. Also, Jean-Claude Juncker's replacement is Ursula von der Leyen, and she has been just nominated in these days. There has been a refreshment in terms of European Union leaders, and she's just been appointed as a replacement of Juncker. Her position is quite, I think, positive, because she said that European Union is ready for a Brexit extension, while her predecessor has been quite strict in terms of Brexit extension. And at this stage, there hasn't been any new discussion. So I think that the UK has got the chance of leaving on the 31st of October and approving the withdrawal agreement, or if the withdrawal agreement is not approved, then there will be either another extension or there will be a no-deal agreement. But what is important to say is that no new negotiations have been taken in place. There has been quite a lot of hostility by the 27 members, by the 27 present representing the European countries. So it's unlikely that new negotiation will take place from now to the 31st of October. Okay. Jean-Claude Juncker said that the agreement has to be respected by whoever is the British next Prime Minister, and there will be no renegotiation as far as the content of the withdrawal agreement is concerned. So that's interesting, but it's also interesting that there is a new lady that's taken his place, and it will be interesting to see what would be Ursula's position in the next couple of months. So very briefly, what does the Article 50 of the Treaty of Lisbon say? So obviously, it gives the possibility to any member of the European Union to leave the European Union, and there will be a period of the withdrawal agreement. And then after that, so it's normally a period of 2 years, and then after that, this period can be extended. So it's very, this article is very loose. I would say it doesn't set a very clear boundary. So, after the 2 years negotiation period, this period can be extended. It doesn't say how the withdrawal agreement needs to be taken in place, but this is important because other countries in Europe might want to follow the example of the UK. So in recent year, you may have seen how Germany, Austria, Italy have been all moved towards the right parties, and a bit of like nationalism spirit has been rising in this country. And very often, if we look at some politics in other countries, there are debates about leaving Euro or leaving Europe. So I think what is important for Europe is that Europe itself wants to establish that Europe is still very strong and unified, and I don't think that making the withdrawal agreement easy for the UK will set a good example for other countries that want to leave. So this is more of a European perspective, because obviously it has been the longest period of peace in Europe since the first treaty has been created, and I can understand how the European Union wants to still keep this period of peace and prosperity, and to keep the unity of their members. So in terms of, very recently there has been a summit in Europe to decide the candidates to be the next European Commission President and other top EU jobs. So we have Ursula von der Leyen. She will be the next European Commission President. Charles Michel will be the European Council President, and David Sassoli will be the European Parliament President. It's interesting that this has just been happening, because we will have new European people on the scene, and as well as a new leader in the UK. So it could be a good restarting point. We could have people more willing to negotiate. We can have perhaps a new scenarios opening up, but it also adds more uncertainty, because having new people on the scene create a bit more uncertainty about what would be their position in regards to Brexit and other European Union matters. Okay, so it is interesting to see how Switzerland and European Union have been working together for many years, since the 60s. Switzerland has been always a very neutral country, but they have been always working and collaborating over the years. So you can think about the financial industry, you can think about pharmaceutical, you can think about any industry in Europe, and how Switzerland and Europe, they really work together. So there is no restriction in terms of the economies or even the movement of people. So there has been recently some restriction on each other financial terms, and the EU-based investment firms are not allowed to trade on Swiss stocks, and vice versa. There has been some tension, and the reason why I'm mentioning this in this webinar is because this can be seen as a position of strength by the European Union in British negotiation. In particular, when you have just one country negotiating with the whole European Union bloc, and the fact of Switzerland is a great model. I think a lot of people would like to agree that it could be a model that could be put in place also for the UK. But we need to look at the history, at the relationship, how Switzerland has always been outside the European Union, but also how this would be very different from the UK, being the only state member that so far has decided to leave the European Union. So I think we need to think about really in terms of the strength of the European Union position, and how there could be like a similar position between Switzerland and UK if you look at the recent negotiation in the recent day. There has been a Mercosur trade deal that it's been very significant, and this was again by the end of June, beginning of July, has been taken about 20 years to negotiate. Again, I think very often there is a lot of interest in the regulation and what's happening within the European Union, but it also shows how the European Union is also signing deals and allowing transaction outside the European Union. In terms of what's happening now here in the UK, we had three different potential Prime Minister: Boris Johnson, Jeremy Hunt and Michael Gove. As you're aware, now the race is between just Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt. We will have a new leader next week, and we will see what will be the direction at that point. Although I just want to say that they will face a very similar scenarios, whoever will be the Prime Minister, because the position of the UK in the European Union hasn't changed, and they will have a very delicate task of completing this withdrawal process with or without a deal. They have similar views in terms of Brexit, although Hunt was one of the main leader in terms of remaining in the European Union, while obviously Boris Johnson had a very different view on Brexit. It was on the other hand it was proposing to leave the European Union. He has said that Angela Merkel was willing to renegotiate, but he also knows that there is very little that can be done in terms of renegotiating a deal with the European Union. So if it's not possible to leave with a deal, is also willing to support a no deal. So it's been very clear that he was not willing to support a no deal, but now is conscious that the clock is ticking, and whatever a decision needs to be made very soon. So Boris Johnson has been obviously the most prominent campaigner for the Leave campaign, and he said that his plan can include renegotiation with Brussels. but has been very clear from a European side front, but also for the UK front, that nobody wants a disorderly Brexit of any kind. So it's not on anybody's interest to leave the European Union disorderly. And he say that obviously is very strict on the 31st of October as a deadline, and he say that he would embrace a no deal if that would be the case, but the UK must leave on the 31st of October. So they have, they have different views on Brexit, but they have to leave. They have to make clear that that's the deadline, and any further delay, I think, will not strengthen the UK position in the European Union. They have different view in terms of like the income tax. Hunt has been framed himself as the pro-business candidate, and he really wants to attract business from Europe. So that would be his intention after Brexit. So the new Prime Minister will face a very different task, because obviously the majority is very thin at the moment, and they have to find a compromise with the DUP to make sure that that this deal gets through. Okay, so there has been recently some quotes and also some action from the Labour Party. The Labour Party has been very strong in ruling out a no-deal Brexit, and has been trying to take control of the Commons agenda. So unfortunately, this hasn't gone through, but it shows how the Labour Party has been really trying to be unified and trying to get to rule out a no-deal Brexit. I would think that there is if you think about a no-deal Brexit. Some people think, oh, well, it's better to rule out a no-deal Brexit because it will create confusion. It will create some disorder in the short period of time. But also, I think if you go to Europe and you negotiate, and you already know that in your own country they already have ruled out a no deal, I think puts the UK in a weaker position, because obviously, if you go to the European Union and you just say we want to avoid at any cost a no-deal Brexit, that probably will make the European Union stronger in terms of negotiating power. So, I mean, there are different views in terms of blocking a no-deal or supporting a no-deal. It's very clear that the Labour Party has been divided, and it's also, previously Theresa May has said that the Labour Party needs to support the government and not create more division within the government. So this is where we are with the Labour Party, and obviously there has been some further support in order to block the No Deal Party. And some of the parliament, some of the government have also decided to block the government expenditure in case that the government wouldn't block the no deal Brexit. So this will create even more friction within the government, because it could be that by then, by September, October, we'll have a very clear idea about the no-deal Brexit or the withdrawal agreement. But if some member of the parliament decide to block the government expenditure, and this can happen twice a year, there will be some serious block within the government. Okay, some First Ministers, such as the First Minister of Scotland or the First Minister of Wales, have really campaigned for a second referendum. and they want to make sure that their electorate could vote in case of Brexit, and they really have been supporting for a second referendum. So just going back to the Labour Party, so Jeremy Corbyn has been under a lot of pressure recently to be more decisive on a Brexit position, and they have been more encouraging in terms of a second referendum. They have been probably campaigning for not to leave, and it has been not really straightforward. I mean, it's clear the position of the Labour Party, and we just need to see if this party can get a bit more unified, and what will be the next step for the Labour Party. Okay, the Liberal Dems have been in a similar position, and they have said that they will not join an alliance with the Labour Party, and they have been quite united in terms of stop Brexit. So they are having a leadership election as at the same time as the Conservative. So again, we'll have to see who between John Swinson and Ed Davey would be the next leader of the Lib Dem party. Okay, so what is the view in terms of like America or other countries about Brexit? So Donald Trump very recently said that the NHS would be on the table for any future trade negotiation. This hasn't been really discussed in the UK, but also like the Ministry of Health has been rejecting any kind of discussion around the NHS. Trump has been saying that Theresa May should have been more assertive in the negotiation with Europe, but also Trump is going to meet Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt on the phone. So recently, as you are aware, the relationship with the US has been very up and down, with the very recent incident that happened with the ambassador in Washington, but also in terms of like what's recently happening in the US. So I don't think Brexit is on their priority at the moment. But again, it would be interesting to see who will be the next ambassador and in the US, and see how the relationship with the UK and the US could improve. Above all, after Brexit, it would be interesting to see how the relationship with the US will be. As you know, US has been always a very strong partner for the UK. Okay, so at the moment we have two different scenarios. So we can live with a deal, or we can live without a deal. There is a lot of uncertainty around no deal preparation, because obviously with the withdrawal agreement we know what we will get, but there have been a lot of discussion around a no deal program. So if the UK leave the European Union without a withdrawal agreement, there will be some repercussion for the European Union as well for the UK. So the European Commission has been already negotiate. Obviously, what the European Commission wants to avoid is the impact of a disorderly or no-deal Brexit. And there has been a program. So the European Commission has published a program of 93 notes that obviously will allow the no deal period of time. So for example, this will include like short visa, free travel for the UK citizen in the 27 states, on the base of the UK reciprocity. Obviously, this is like a program that the European Commission has prepared to avoid a disorderly Brexit, and likewise, the government has published some information about what to do in case of a no deal. So a lot of information can be found on the UK government website, and there's quite a lot of plans already in place. So, for example, if you go on the website, there's quite a lot of information about the publication that the UK government has been putting together in terms of the guidance for business on procedures and processes at the border in case of a no-deal scenario. On the website still we can see that 145,000 businesses we've tried with the European Union has been contacting, and they have been advised how to start getting ready for a no-deal custom procedure. So there's some information about ports, traders, pharmaceutical firms, and other organizations that use the border about potential disruption. There are plans in place, and I would recommend to have a look at the UK government website and to have a look at all of the advice. And depending on the industry, unfortunately, during due to the time today, I couldn't really provide an overview on each individual industry, but I found the UK government website very useful in terms of updates and in terms of papers on citizen rights, and obviously this is aimed to give a bit of clarity about the case of a no deal plan. So there is a multi-layered approach to contingency to secure the medicine, for example, of supply, to secure the supply of medicine. And what has been interesting is only 1% of the medicine has not been already gone through the procedure. So there could be some disruption in terms of a no-deal preparation, but the government is prepared, and we need to make sure that the stockpiling is done in a way that will ensure some disruption during the no-deal period. But it's also all very uncertain at the moment, because we'll have to see what happens after the 31st of October, and if there will be an extension of the negotiation, and if the no-deal period will come into force straight after the 31st of October, or if there will be a longer period of time to negotiate. Or, for example, if the withdrawal agreement will come into force, we will be much more sure about what is going to happen. Also, the actual withdrawal agreement has been very criticized by the internal minister. Has been it could allow a bit of in terms of certainty in terms of what to do, in terms of ensuring that there will be more of a continuity to what is happening right now with being part of Europe and the withdrawal agreement. Also, from a financial perspective, it's not really the best deal for the UK, but at least will ensure that there is quite a lot of the existing rules and existing regulation that will actually be will be considered for a longer period of time. Okay, so this was the end of the webinar. As I said, it was more of an overview, was a bit of a summary where we are right now, and the two different scenarios of living with a deal or without a deal. This is everything for today. So, have you got any question at this stage?
Hello. Oh, Valerie, thank you so much for presenting all of that, and I can just see how much research went into creating the overview, and also putting all that information together, including as up-to-date an overview as possible around the current political system. The link that you referenced to the government website, would you be able to share that with me so that I can then pass that on to everybody? And I'm just wondering, in the research that you did, whether there were any other any other platforms or websites or organizations that you felt were maybe able to share a balanced view on the approach that business can take. I don't know if you saw anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. I can share a bit of a biography about some information, and definitely the website, the UK government website link. So that's absolutely fine. I have a couple of organizations that I'm in touch with, and I follow them. So one of them is the ABPI, which is relevant for the pharmaceutical industry. So I can share some of the link of also where I get updated and where I get the information from. So that's absolutely fine.
Great. Okay. Because I think that would be really helpful. I know for even if we look at the stuff that we're doing within WeConnect, it's just understanding where is there kind of straightforward information to look at. Solange, you said you had a question. Do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, hi, Vali, and thank you very much. It was really informative. What I would like to know is, do you have any information about European funds for the entrepreneurs? Because this is the biggest question that I do come across as well in my field, and lots of entrepreneurs are applying for European funds, but they're not aware of what's going to happen if there's a no deal situation.
What kind of funds do you mean? Do you mean like funds to grow and develop your business, or what do you mean by European funds?
Yeah, either seed funds or grow and develop your business. So there are lots of funds going on in European Union, especially for women entrepreneurs, because it's part of their developmental plan for the next 5 years, and they are opening them to tech and social impact companies. So
okay. I don't know if you'll know anything specifically around female entrepreneurship in European funds. Did you see anything around that in your
not specifically on the entrepreneur part for women, but what I can say that obviously after the 31st of October there will be a period which is still considered part of the transition period until the end of December 2020, where if the UK leave with the current withdrawal agreement, UK will have still to be part of the current budget. So funding the European Union initiative, that will mean that also the European initiative will be available for for all of the state members, so including the UK. So if the withdrawal agreement will be in place, then obviously during this period of time the UK will fund the European initiatives, and then likewise all of the European initiative will be still available for all the different categories, including women in business. So I think that's probably the more positive approach that we can have here. In case of a no deal, probably it's very difficult to predict, but obviously there wouldn't be, I would imagine, any financial implication, or they would be very reduced. So in that case, it would be also the funding would be very reduced.
Yeah. You'd like to think that the UK government would be able to replace programmes that are currently being funded out of Europe, that they might be able to replace some of that funding with UK funds. But as Valerie says, that's the type of thing that we'll need to wait and see. Valerie, did you see anything in your research? And I think MD Group has maybe done this around opening entities in other European companies to enable a business to still have a European entity. I don't know if there's any information or background you can share about that around opening like another company but in a country that will still be in the EU.
Yes, and you're exactly right, Maggie. This is what MD Group has done. So we have opened very recently an office in Dublin. So to make sure that even in case of a no deal Brexit, or with all the uncertainty surrounding Brexit, there is still an alternative option for our clients. We have, a majority of our clients in Europe or in US, so they can still work with us. They can still work with us, but also having a very minimal disruption. So I think that could be an alternative option for a lot of business in the UK to have at least a representative entity in Europe. So this will give the possibility of dealing with the European companies with no disruption at all. But this is sort of like a backup plan. And I'm not sure about other companies in Europe that have done the same. Maybe opening an entity in the UK to make sure that there is no disruption in case of a no-deal Brexit. But that could be definitely an option.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else on the call, if you can use the chat function, or indeed let me know if anybody else has approached that, or if anybody else has got any more tips to share from their perspective about what their company's done. I guess to prep so far, but it's very difficult to predict. As we all know, this whole scenario is very unpredictable. But I don't know, if you have any more questions for Vali, please do use the chat function. Or please, if there's any comments that you'd like to share about what you've been doing within your business and you would like to kind of share that with the group, that would be amazing. And Vali, this obviously covers all sorts of different aspects of business, including staff and freelancers and contracts and all sorts of stuff. Are there? I mean, we talked about other resources, say like the government website, and I think you mentioned a pharmaceutical body. Have you come across any resources? I don't know, either from almost like an employment perspective about scenarios that businesses would need to take into account if they're employing staff from across Europe? And I'm just trying to think of the key pain points that will be cropping up for people.
I think, like, looking at the withdrawal agreement, online you can find a very concise version of the withdrawal agreement, and it's very clear in terms of like movement of people and what is going to happen after the 31st of October. So, and this has been, one of the elements that's been quite criticised by the government, because obviously with the withdrawal agreement, the free movement of people will be ensured during the transition period, and there will be minimal disruption if you want to. We want to see that way for the industry, for businesses, in terms of like allowing people to come, but also to leave and go and work, for example, UK citizen, and go and work in other countries in Europe. So the withdrawal agreement is very clear on the free movement of people. So that's a really good way, and I can share a couple of websites where you can find a good summary of what is included in the withdrawal agreement.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that would be amazing. So thank you so much. I don't see any more questions that have come through on the chat box. So I think we can wrap up now. I honestly, I do want to say such a massive thank you to you for researching this, both, as I say, both the history and the kind of what's been happening in the current scenario, and all the different implications and the stance that the main political parties in the UK are taking. That was hugely valuable, and we will share your. You're going to give us a deck that we can share along with a link to some of these resources. So I hope this has been helpful. This is a tricky topic for us all, indeed for European counterparts, as they're working out how they're going to continue working and trading with the UK going forward as well. So Valeria, I just want to say a big thank you for presenting, and thank you to everybody for dialing in live, and I hope that this has been useful. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.